Hi guys, today at the English podcast we have Tim Ventura, who is a business executive and a technology speaker. And the reason I invited you today, Tim, is to show Russian specialists that we are welcomed in the international market. And you told me that you already work with some Russian specialists, and maybe you have some cases which you can share with us, maybe cases which caught your attention um, more.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we were talking, um, Russian-speaking American or English-speaking people, work together fairly often in a lot of different industries. I think one of the biggest examples is probably like crypto and blockchain, right? There are a lot of people who speak Russian in that on Telegram, and that's something where there's a lot of multilingual communication, I guess. Now, one of the things that I've seen is most Americans don't do very well with Russian as a language, right? And that's I think that's just kind of a cultural limitation of our country. Um, Anglophiles typically don't speak too many other languages, sometimes Spanish, but I think that's usually about it. But yeah.
Yeah, right. So you communicate on Telegram mostly. So in your examples, or it's something else like Zoom meetings and.
Well, so yeah, Zoom is pretty big for video communication. I think Zoom is the standard. That's what I use most of the time. We're recording on StreamYard right now. That's also pretty big. Um, for chat type applications, I think probably Telegram and WhatsApp would be big ones. Again, Telegram it seems to be focused more on the cryptocurrency markets. So people who are doing development there, coders and things like that might be using that a little bit more. It really depends on what the company or the organization that you're working with uses. Some organizations use Microsoft Teams. That's not something that I use, but I know people who do, you know.
Mhm.
So it varies from one organization to the other.
Sounds like you using same applications. So we do. It's like it's not. It's good to hear because I thought Telegram was popular in Russia mostly because a Russian programmer invented it and so on. But yep.
Well, I think so. The impression that I have is that it's really the tools that are used are based more around the community, I guess, than the nationality. And so, again, so a couple of years ago, I did some work for a blockchain company based in Kazan, and they used Telegram a lot. That was kind of their primary. So, again, in that industry, that's kind of a big one for communication, but it's good to be able to use all of the different tools, right? Like for meetings, I think Zoom is pretty universal, and I think the impression that I have is that happened during the pandemic. Um, I was doing consulting work before the pandemic for a couple of years, and I worked with two or three different companies that used Zoom, but it was an occasional thing, right? They were like, "We'll have a
Mm-hmm.
video meeting, get your Zoom fired up, we'll hop on it and we'll chat." And we might use it like once a week, once every couple of weeks. When the pandemic hit, at least in the United States, for about a month there, everyone had worked from home and Zoom just became standard. And so, I mean, now I use Zoom. I mean, pretty much every meeting that I do has Zoom involved with it. So,
Yeah, right. So, how is it like working with a Russian specialists? Is their English level good enough?
yeah. Yeah. So, and again, this is just it varies from person to person and organization to organization, right? But one of the things that I found as an American is I've worked in diverse working groups with people all over the globe. And so depending on the industry, right? Like When I was in the real estate sector, they would outsource a lot to the Philippines. And people in the Philippines tend to speak Tagalog, that's their native language,
Mm-hmm.
and they also speak Spanish and they speak English. And English is often a third language, right? Um,
I see.
if you outsource to other Asian countries, right, like in China, Chinese is the primary language and English is secondary. In Russia, it would be the same thing. In the blockchain and crypto industry, in Eastern Europe, you're going to be talking about native languages with English as a second language. And so, as an American, one of the things that I've had is a flexibility, right? It's more about communicating ideas than perfect English. So, I guess what I would want to express, I would genuinely want to express this is um, people should feel confident in their ability to communicate and not worry about being judged because they don't have perfect English.
Right.
Even, you know, even native English speakers don't have perfect English. None of us communicate perfectly. So,
Yeah, I get this a lot from my students. They are super specialists in different spheres, marketing, IT developers, and sales assistants in the international level. And they are coming to me to improve skills they have, and we're working on it, of course. And it takes around 15 hours to make them feel better. But anyway, uh, they feel nervous before each Zoom meeting and etc. And this is exactly what I wanted them to hear from an English speaker himself. Yeah, that guys, just don't worry. Your expertise. This is what what we need. This is just what we have to be concentrated on.
yeah. Well, and I guess one thing that I should definitely express is it's human nature to get nervous and feel
Mhm.
anxiety, right? Especially when you're in a meeting and, it's important to your career, to your job, to your business relationships. So there's pressure that starts naturally
Mhm.
there. And then if language is not perfect or you feel self-conscious about your language, that adds like stress and anxiety, right? But the problem I've seen is when you have stress and anxiety like that, it builds, right? And so it becomes more difficult to communicate effectively. And so part of it is just kind of, shaking it out and okay,
Mhm.
just relax. And it's really about communication. It's about getting the idea across and being friendly, and being professional and just working together, and building things together.
Exactly. Thank you for these words. If we see an American in Russia and he speaks with mistakes, it doesn't matter. We're gonna love this person. We're gonna invite him to our home and feed him. I don't know. Because for us, for Russians, uh, people from America, it's some exotic experience, and still even today, and we are very friendly. And can you say the same about Russians in America? Will it be as friendly? I mean, maybe you in working relationships or in the street somewhere asking for directions.
Yeah, well, so I live in Washington State, and I grew up in a fairly small town, and I think that all of us we have a couple of different examples there, but for the most part, growing up in my area, right, it was native English speakers. It was culturally, it was small town America, right? So you grow up kind of familiar with one set of communications and ideas and beliefs and things like that. And what we've seen is the world change. I mean, over the last few decades, especially, I think the internet was really where that started. It opened things up, right? I mean, so you
Sure.
and I are on different sides of the planet and we're communicating in real time right now. And that wasn't possible, 20 years ago, that would have been unheard of. So I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that there's a lot of change going for all of us, and we all have to just learn how to accept and embrace those differences because it's new for all of us, right? I mean, it's a learning experience and it's new. Now, what I should mention is I'm on the West Coast of America, and I'm sure that the East Coast is the same way. But America is a melting pot, and it has people from all over the world. And so in my area now, where I live now, we have people from Russia. We have people from, the Eastern European states, lots of people from Asia as well. And so, Americans are not locked into one culture anymore. We're
Mhm.
familiar with the other cultures, and
Yes.
we interact with people from those cultures, but we don't, typically speaking, it just as Joe average American on the street, I don't think that we have the depth of knowledge that we probably could or should. And again, that's because there's so much change happening so rapidly.
You mean knowledge of the language or some culture exchange?
I think it's a mixture. It's a mixture of both. For instance, one of the things that I've seen, I think this is probably over the last 10 or 15 years, the United States has had a lot of immigration from Ukraine, right? We
Mhm.
have a lot of Ukrainian people here. And that's something that's newer, and so we're learning to understand that culture, but it's just kind of outside of our context. Um,
That's right.
and so I think it's important to keep in mind that this is not it's not something where it's a completely foreign culture to us. These are
Mhm.
these are our neighbors. These are people that we live with, people that we're friends with, people that we go to church with. I mean, so yeah, they're part of our country and a part of our culture, but it's new, and we're just still learning how to understand it.
Right. So, if a Russian specialist, oh, anyway, Russian speaking specialist, or I guess I'm talking about Russia so much because I'm from Russia. But anyway, a foreign expert. So his expertise comes first, and his English skills comes like after. But the thing is that people from uh, like in his office will not look at him like, oh my god, he's stupid, he missed a preposition or an article,
No,
like
no,
no
yeah,
one
no,
cares right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Well, and so this wouldn't be just about Russia, but again, I work at a very large corporation, and I think I shared this example with you. We had an executive vice president who was from Eastern India, and he was very, very, very intelligent and very good at his job, but he had a very heavy Indian accent. And this was 20 years ago, right? So, things continue to change. But at the time, this was during the Seattle Redmond tech boom, and
Mhm.
we were doing lots of very intense work, moving very rapidly. We would go to weekly meetings with him, and all of us would sit there and he would describe the goals that were coming up for the next week. And very few people could understand what he was actually saying. And so in that case, I would go to the meeting and I would do my best to take notes, and I would find excuses to email him because his written English was perfect. And so it was no problem, right? And so I would just find a little excuse to email him and just double check and make sure, but there was a joke in the office with some of the other people, and they would do the same thing, and we would compare notes, and everyone tried to be polite, and again, it wasn't a failure or a fault of this person. He had come up in a corporate division that was in India, and so that was his native culture, and he had moved here, and just he hadn't had time to work on his accent yet. But you have people with accents and language differences from all over the world, right? And that's
Right.
part of this melting pot aspect of American culture. And so most
Mhm.
Americans that I've met, that's something that we work with on a day-to-day basis, and we just don't think twice about it.
All right, I see. So also, the Russian accent is not the hardest to understand. So Indian and Chinese are harder to understand. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that would probably vary from person to
Mm-hmm.
person, right? What the
Mm-hmm.
most difficult, what I have found is um, Asian accents are typically more difficult, and it's because the structure of their language is different. But that's
Mm-hmm.
that's just me. What I found is when Asian people when they speak English, the way they put sentences together, if they're struggling with English, that for me can be more difficult to understand. Russian language seems like it's based on a similar structure, right? Because it's a European language, and so it's more about tone and inflection rather than sentence structure.
Yeah, right. So, we have a saying here that whatever you do, and it doesn't matter how good you are at this, there is always an Asian guy who does it better. So, I prepared a list of questions for you, and you kind of answered a third. Can you share your opinion about Russian tech sector? Yes. So, um, are you interested in what we do here or what our specialists do here? Uh, do you want to visit Russia and to see what's going on here, like technology speaking?
Well, yeah, yeah, I'm busy with work here, right? So travel is always a challenge. Yeah, so a couple of the things, again, this primarily comes out of working with the blockchain company, but a couple of the things that I noticed was um, Russian programmers are very, very, very good, and that's something that's underutilized, and it's there's a lack of awareness of that, I think in the rest of the world. And so um, again, every person and every skill, every training is a little bit different, right? It varies from person to person. But I've always been very impressed by the Russian programmers that I've worked with. In terms of language, or I'm sorry, in
Mhm.
terms of logic and mathematical skills and structuring programming and things like that. I've always been really excited to work with Russian programmers, project managers, things along those lines. And so that probably comes out of cultural backgrounds and the educational system and what gets stressed, when they're coming up. But yeah, those are really exciting areas. And I so one of the things that I found is um, there are different strengths that people from different cultures can contribute, and that is one that Russians can bring to teamwork, right?
Yeah,
So,
right. When I teach school kids, they say that they love math, mostly boys, of course, and they're so good in it. And I'm just like, oh my God, like young boys are excited about math lessons and geometry and so on. So I guess they are. So I hope you will meet them in 10 years or something like that, you're gonna work at some project. So I just recently found out that Elon Musk actually wanted to build his project here in Russia first. And that was a surprise for me. And I was like, what? How could you guys turn him off? Yep.
oh, now what project were you at?
His space program or something. First of all, we know that he loves our space technology and that he wanted to start his projects here on the base of what we have.
Yeah, well, and Russia has been a leader in space technology, right? And this goes back to the 1960s, or actually before that. But I think Yuri Gagarin, I mean that era, and so Russia has been developing, better and better space technologies. So I'm sure that that's something that he wanted to take advantage of.
Yeah. So anyway, I in my dreams, I wish countries work together and we send all these spaceships, and like it would be the best. I guess someday this day will come. Okay. Anyway, so mm, like I would love ask you a lot of questions, but but you are a technology speaker, so will AI take our jobs? And I would be more particular. Will AI replace teachers, English teachers, for example?
I don't think so. I don't think it will. In fact, I do a podcast, and this was something that I was talking about just yesterday. Um, every time a new technology comes along, people are concerned that it's going to take their jobs. But
Hmm.
what we find is when jobs are taken, new jobs are created. And like a good example of that would be the automobile put horse and buggy manufacturers out of business, right?
Sure.
I mean that whole industry, the buggy makers went out of business, horses became a hobby thing, they're no longer used as transportation. So that's gone. And so people who were worried about that, maybe they were right to worry, but it also created the automobile industry, and it opened up all of these new capabilities, and it created far more jobs than it took. So
Right. You don't need, sorry, you don't need 100 people to build a horse.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's just one example, right? And we've
Right.
seen that time and time again where, technology enters the marketplace and it adds new capabilities and it creates new industries and it adds change. And so I think maybe one of the important takeaways for AI is just that people should become familiar with it and stay on top of where it is and where it's going as an industry, because it seems like it is going to change our world. Then the question becomes, how will it change our world? And sometimes that's obvious and sometimes it's less obvious. I mean, um,
Mhm.
for instance, Zoom, I think, is far more powerful as an app than we tend to realize, right? I mean, again, I'm doing a real-time video call with you, and we are on opposite sides of the planet right now. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be you and me. We could add in people from all over the planet and have, 5 or 10 people in different places in the world talking to each other at once, having a conversation. And 20 years ago, that would have been unheard of, you know.
Yeah.
People would have it just would not have made sense. So
We just Sorry, we just needed to hire one math teacher to count all time zones to calculate. Yep, sorry. Yeah.
yeah. And I think technologies like that bring people together also. I think that's really it's something that we need to keep in mind is um, you know, we turn on the news in whatever country we're in, and we see people on the news, and they always build up drama, right? It's like, we're doing this, and this is our side, and those are their side, and we don't get along, and all of that. And it's been that way for centuries. And
Mhm.
um, but one of the things that we're seeing now is the internet is providing these enabling technologies that let real people work together across these cultural and national boundaries. And so I think it's bringing people together in a new way. And some of the nationalist rhetoric from different countries, it just doesn't make sense the way that it used to, because we actually work with people on a daily basis in those other cultures. And so we see how each other lives.
Yeah, right. You're right. So AI just helps to us, I guess, right now. And if I mean, if you're a specialist in something, AI just adds to this. It's not taken from you, just making you better as a specialist. Like I'm using super in professional dictionaries during the lesson and using AI technologies and context search engines. They just improving what I do, but there will always be one lazy student who will who will not want to open a dictionary. He will always need someone to use this AI for him. Like, I guess something like.
Yeah, well, and that brings up other questions as well. So my daughter uses ChatGPT sometimes for her homework, and I think they allow that in some classes, and then in others they ask them not to. But the interesting thing there is, okay, if you're a native Russian or Spanish or one of the Asian languages or Indian or some other language, right? You can now use ChatGPT to construct perfect English sentences, paragraphs, articles, communications, and the upside to that is, in terms of writing, it improves communication and it will help reduce that anxiety, right? You won't feel as anxious because you'll know that it's written correctly. So that's the good side. But then the downside to it could be, if people rely on that too much, they forget how to actually do it themselves. So,
Exactly. We were once in a trip, and it was a lake, mountains, no internet connection. There was a woman from London and from Manchester, and we were having a very warm conversation. And in ChatGPT just can't get there, and so mm, I guess. Oh, there was a question. My husband actually helped me with that because he's a marketer. That social media uh, are coming to an end, and messengers are taking over because people censoring themselves in social media, and maybe there will be a new way of people to communicate. So my first question: do you think that someday social media will come to an end? As
yeah, well, that's an interesting question. Um, and I think the answer is yes. I want to try and, from my experience. So I got started with the internet in 1995, I think, right at the beginning. And there have been waves of technology and popular websites, right, that have come and gone, and every time it was like one of the first ones, well, back in the day, like the Alta Vista search engine was giant. It was like, you got to use this, it's wonderful. And then Alta Vista was replaced by Yahoo, right, in the late 1990s. Yahoo was so big, and they had their own magazine. I believe they had a TV show. They had lots and lots of different, media around them. It was enormous. It was too big to fail. And then Yahoo was effectively replaced by Google, and so it continues to go, right? It's one to another, to another, to another.
Mhm.
In terms of communications, Yahoo groups were very big. You know, excuse me.
God
Sorry.
bless. Yeah.
We we used Yahoo groups back in the day for a lot of science communications, and but what I noticed back then was, even in terms of these groups, and you could say the same thing for other websites, like Slashdot was really big for a long time. Um, you would get a group, and it would start to become popular, and you could count the number of messages, right? You would have, a few dozen per month, and as it became more popular, you would have hundreds, and then thousands, and then tens of thousands. And there was a natural life cycle to each one of these, and I started to notice that over time. I'm not sure why. I'm not, but I've noticed that with internet technologies in general, there is a natural life cycle. And after it's been around for a certain point of time, it tends to just stagnate and effectively die, right? And most of those don't go away. And so it can be misleading because it's dead, but it's still there, right? It just loses its relevance. And
Mhm.
Yahoo groups, I mean, they uh, if I understand correctly, they just closed that down 2 months ago, 3 months
Mm,
ago. That was about 20 years after it became irrelevant. I mean, people quit using that about 20 years ago. It just better things came out, right? But those archives stayed online for 20 years. So
mhm,
that's one example. Another example, I believe, and people might argue with me, but another example might be Slashdot. In around 2005, 2006, I remember Slashdot was impossible to get articles published on. It was so popular, that you had to fight with different editors to get stuff published there. And today,
mhm,
you never even hear about it. So,
mm.
I mean, each one of these they come and they go over time, and then the question becomes, how do you stay on top of which one is the most popular? One of the interesting ones for me is Facebook. I feel like Facebook is losing relevance now. I could be mistaken, but what I've seen is the quality of posts and the quality of advertisements seems to be going down. you know
True.
there seems to be a shift to Instagram, and Facebook seems to be less relevant than it was in the past. And even Instagram seems like it's struggling a little bit. So you'd mentioned people going to messengers.
Mhm.
I've read that in other places. So what I do know is a lot of the science people that I work with are communicating using WhatsApp, and they have lots of multi-threaded WhatsApp communications. Again, the crypto industry is very, very big on Telegram. Another one is Discord servers.
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
For IT people only. Mhm,
yeah. So, yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And
mhm.
those will probably end up being replaced by something in the future as well. So it's just staying on top of that change.
Right. So messengers. And what about Apple Vision? Have you tried
I haven't
this?
tried it yet. I've seen the now. So what interested me about that, I could be mistaken, but in the commercial, I saw they had a primary monitor, right? And that was the
Mhm,
real monitor.
mhm.
And the person put the goggles on, and they had virtual monitors to the left and the right. And I thought, that's something that I could use. Um, I mean, I don't use VR in my normal job, and the, I'm not sure if that's something that I would want to use, but the idea of being able to add virtual items around my primary work area, that has some appeal to it. So it's something I might look at.
So maybe may Apple Vision replace smartphones? Because I can imagine people getting tired of taking a smartphone with them everywhere all the time, and your hands always like you can't use one of your hands, like something like that. So may some it was Google Glass, but it didn't become popular. Uh,
Yeah. Apple Vision is kind of like Oculus. I don't
mhm,
think either one of those will replace. And the reason is they're bulky and they're heavy, right? And
mhm,
and so it's not something you'd really want to wear in public. Now, I have
mhm,
heard, I'm not sure if this is true, that Apple is working on glasses, right? And
mm,
and then I know Facebook, I think, or Meta has glasses with a built-in camera, and
mhm,
Google actually several years ago, Google came out with a version of that as well. So normal vision glasses that have built-in augmented reality, I think we
mhm.
we may see that, right? But I,
Yeah.
I don't think it'll replace the smartphone. I think it will augment it. And a good example is smart watches, right? Like I bought an Apple Watch for my father for
Mhm,
Christmas, and the reason was he's elderly and he has heart issues and he has mobility issues, right? And so, one of the things that technology is focused on is it has fall detection, it has heart rate monitoring, it has, sleep analysis. And those
mhm,
are things that the phone doesn't do so well, right? But
mhm.
but they've managed to customize the watch to fit into this market niche. And so for elderly people, that can be very helpful, you know.
Mhm.
I think Apple was the first, and Samsung has one, and I believe Google has one. Smartwatches are, it's just becoming a product niche, right, for whatever
Mhm.
ecosystem people are in. So I would guess that smart glasses will be the same thing. It may take a year or two to determine what they're best for, right?
Mhm.
But once they become more commonplace, it will probably just become something that's added to the phone and not a replacement for it.
Yeah, well, right. I love to manage my robot vacuum cleaner just using my smartphone, and I play with it like
I don't have, yes, that I do not have a robot vacuum cleaner. I have a friend I have a friend, yeah,
who has a
so
cat and a robot cleaner, and they had the problem, you know.
yes, no, actually, yes. Yeah, I talked to her the other day, and she said that she walked in the door, and she said her Roomba, she thought it was cat food. She said, "I'm not sure, I don't want to smell it," but the Roomba went over the cat food and left streaks all over her carpet. And I
Oh,
thought, okay,
okay.
yeah, it's like, I'll just do it by hand. I'm
Uh,
okay.
yeah, so these robots, they can't live with any with pets, but I just adore mine. It's not as smart as I would want it. It can't read my mind. I see a dirty spot on the floor, and I just like, please go there, please go. Okay, I need to get up and put it there. But anyway, so uh, well, uh, you have a Tesla. Is it
Yeah,
right? So
yeah. I have
I
a
made some
Tesla.
research on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a Tesla Model 3. Yeah. And that's the less expensive car. I have the dual motor one because it has a little bit longer range, and it does a little bit better in the snow. So because it has all-wheel drive. But um,
So is it self-driving?
it has that feature, it has that capability. I don't turn that on. I don't use that.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't trust it yet. Now, I, people do use it. A lot of people feel comfortable with it, but for me, it's I think there are some safety issues there, and it's not something to experiment with, right? It only has to make one mistake to kill someone. So
Mm, sure.
yeah, so I'll let somebody else figure out that until it gets perfected.
About I'm sorry, it's off topic, but when you said about one mistake, we usually were not hiding our belongings on the beach when we were going to swim. And one our friend told us, "Why you don't hide it? Why you don't take it with you, or somebody leave somebody to watch it?" And she's like, "Oh, it never happened to us." And he's like, "Guys, you just need one time to for it to happen." So here is the same thing, but also we have in Moscow Yandex cars, self-driving. I don't know what cars are those, but anyway, they're learning to drive at some districts, not everywhere. And we have just in the center some delivery robots.
Hmm.
Do
Yeah.
you have a lot of them? These boxes with the food?
Not yet, but I think that that's coming. I just did again, because I do the podcast, I just did some coverage of that. There are test markets in the United States where that's being experimented with. It doesn't appear to be national in any way yet, but
Mhm.
it's something that's on its way in. You know, robot deliveries, and some of those, like for me, the idea of drone deliveries is I I just every time I think about that, I smile because I just picture drones falling out of the sky left and right, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I like the idea, but then well, I mean, for instance, Russia is a northern country, right? And the same
Mhm.
way the United States is. In the Seattle area, for about half of the year, we have storms that come through. We have cold wind, rain, snow, things like that. I'm like, how are drones going to be able to navigate in that, right?
Mhm.
Now, in good weather in the summer, sure, that makes sense. But I mean, if it's October or November and you have a giant storm blowing through, how is the package delivery going to work? I don't know.
Yeah, a very good very good question, because yesterday I was running home, but I was running on place because we have some bad architectural decisions here, and houses are built in a way that they create some wind flow or air flow, and that one was crazy. I was just trying to go, but I couldn't. The wind was facing me, so it was a disaster. A drone would just break, and it's expensive. It's and it can hurt someone, so it needs some parachute, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of these, we have all these new technological capabilities, and we just have to see which ones fit and which ones work. And
Mhm,
I think what'll probably end up happening is some of them that we think are good, right? And drones may be like this, maybe not. They just won't work, or at least in some areas, in some product niches, it just won't work the way that we thought it would. And then in other areas, we'll find new tools or tools that we didn't anticipate being able to use that'll work great, right? And so
mhm,
just over time, it'll be this evolutionary iterative process. But I'm really excited about all of these technologies because they are bringing the world together. I mean, if you think about the change that's happened just in the last few years, I mean, again, I think Zoom is a perfect example where it's making the world smaller and it's bringing people together. And a lot of that has only been in the last, what, 3 years since the pandemic.
mhm, mhm.
The pandemic, for at least for me and for the people that I work with, that was the part where we all started using Zoom on a daily basis, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's just one example. The software that we're actually using today is StreamYard, right? And
Mhm,
that's become popular after Zoom because
mhm,
Zoom is not the best for recorded webinars. And I use StreamYard for my online conference as well.
mhm.
So, we have all these things that are developing and coming out.
Yeah, like I and it's yeah, right. I can't add to this. What I love about these robot technologies is that people come and help them when it's stuck in the snow, and everyone is like, "Let's help this little guy." What the first movie which I saw in the movie theater, I was 12. I Robot with Will Smith, and it's just I love this movie, and I'm waiting for this technology to come and robots to help us with on daily basis, like Zoom, And I see this happening, and I don't see a problem here. I don't see robots taking over the world. Do you think mm, they can take over or something?
No, so and I Robot was based on the book by Isaac Asimov, right? And so,
Mhm,
but I think one of the big ideas of that genre of science fiction is that these machines are our children in a sense,
yeah.
and I think that's maybe the best way to view them. I mean, this is something that humanity has created, right? These are our
Mhm,
children, and we should probably treat them that way and give them the kind of love and respect that a parent would give any child,
mhm,
and I think that's also probably kind of the safest approach. You know, there's always this concern that it's a machine, it's not real, and therefore it must be a slave to humans. And I think that idea and that approach is probably dangerous, right?
mhm, mhm,
um, if we're trying to create something that can think and solve problems like us, we should probably try and treat it the way that we would treat other human beings, right? With kindness and love and respect and patience. And even if it doesn't understand those itself, I think it's important for us to treat them that way for our own, self-satisfaction, right?
Exactly, like this robot vacuum cleaner, which is actually moving by itself, helping me. I mean, I recommend you this one. Like, this is perfect. So, anyway, it needs some assistance. Like, I mean, I need to clean it, and and when I do this, I feel like I'm working with something which is alive, and helping it to become clean and to look good, and when it's in a corner and it's dusty, and I just worry because I'm a bad owner. So um it's like the first step, actually, because I already see in restaurants these robots which serve food, and you can also put your tray on it, and so they are moving among us, and so uh,
Yeah. Yeah, and with a service robot like that, I mean, it may not, in terms of showing love to it, right?
mhm,
That seems strange, but I think, I think respect and kindness, right? And I think
mhm,
that's the most important thing. And it's about, I think it's important how we treat them, but I think it also says something really important about how we treat each other as well, right?
mhm.
Like we treat robots that way because we should be treating everything that way. That's kind of my
Exactly.
thought.
Yeah, this is a very, very good video we recorded, which is it's needed, like,
Well, thank
some.
you.
Yeah.
Again, for your audience, it is very early in the morning in my area, and I was up late last night, so I'm just surviving on coffee at this point.
Mm,
But
Well, I was impressed when you said that you go anytime something with my camera. I need to try to. Now it's even worse. It's all white. It lost the sense of color completely. Hold on, just I will try to adjust it. One sec. Please, please, become
oh
become
yeah,
better.
and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wouldn't worry. I wouldn't worry about that either.
yeah.
I
Well,
mean, all
uh-huh.
of these, all of these things. Um, Again, there's so much change so fast, right? It's not
Mhm,
just language, but it's technology. Again, I do podcasting, and they have all sorts of different cameras and microphones,
mhm,
internet connections. Some are really fast; they have great quality. Others are really slow. You have people who are on Wi-Fi and it'll work really well and then they'll disappear, right? And,
mhm.
and so again, there is so much change and it's happening so rapidly that I think it's important for all of us to just be patient and tolerant and understanding with each other because no one is perfect, and from one day to the next, right? Like
Mhm,
you may
mhm.
have a great internet connection one day and you may have problems the next. So it's just important for everyone to work together and realize, we're all learning this as we go through it.
Exactly, and not to blame the other side, because usually when something goes wrong during the Zoom meeting, there are some people who just blaming their guest, not guest, like another one, and not their connection. I always try to stay diplomatic and say, I guess there is something we should solve, and I'm not sure what. Like I'm not trying to blame anyone, but sometimes I know that my Wi-Fi was perfect, but I just don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, still, you're right. You're right. The same with English. The same with English language. Like losing the focus, the camera loses focus. A person loses an article. It's all the part. I read a book by Marie Kondo, Magic Cleaning something. She can help a person to create a Pinterest house, a Pinterest home. And she said that when we have a mess at home, it's very important because it's a fun part. It means your house is alive. You have to love mess at home, she said, and that changed my point, like my view, my perception of the mess and not perfect things.
Yeah, well, and again, I think the most important thing that I could stress from my own experience is we all feel self-conscious and we all feel anxiety about our communication, right? But but part of it is we we need to forgive ourselves for not being perfect, right? Because none of us are perfect, and we need to not expect others to be perfect. And that's something that again, I have seen that definitely in the United States. People come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and they all communicate differently, and it's common for people to have, different accents, different levels of proficiency, different specializations and focuses. And so it's understood that no one is going to communicate perfectly. And even if they're a good communicator, we all have good days and we all have bad days, right? And
Exactly.
so it's about, I think it's about being tolerant and patient and kind with others, but also with ourselves, you know,
Sure.
and not forcing ourselves to that higher standard. I think it's good to do the best that you can and always try to do better. But if you have a bad day, don't beat yourself up.